we are back. Oops, you can't see. To talk about some of these Germanic groups, get to Charlemagne, who we've been postponing for a long time, and talk about the Vikings as well. Here an image from the TV show Vikings. I have no idea if it's historically accurate because I have never seen it, because I hear that there's a lot of fake blood and violence, and even though it's fake, I don't like to watch those things. So I don't know if it's accurate or not. But moving along, we've talked about these, when we talked about the Franks, these Germanic groups that are pretty easy to identify where they're from, because, like I said, there's this peninsula of what is the country of Denmark, the Danes, that we'll get to in a bit with the Vikings. But all the Germanic stuff is kind of right around in this area, just below it. So you just find the peninsula, and then all of that is the Germanic territory. It's where the country of Germany is today, roughly around in that area, with Denmark above it. So the Franks are one of those groups. We talked about Clovis on the last test converting to Christianity, and the Franks therefore becoming important important followers of the Catholic universal Christianity that was present at the time, even though it's a big deal that most of these people can't read. There's really not much of a written language. There's Latin for super smart people, but none of these Frankish soldiers or common peasants are able to read or write or have access to a Bible, or know they don't know what it says. So that means there will be some serious issues as far as the legitimacy of actual conversion. Charlemagne is a key Frankish king. So he's from the Franks, the area that's now France, rules for a pretty long time when people are dying of all sorts of bleh stuff. His name translates to Charles the Great. You can get that idea of Charles the Magnificent. It's the same. It's from named kind of for his grandfather, a guy named Charles Martel. Like I said, for a long time, he ushers in this thing called the Carolingian dynasty. This is, you say, okay, what's the deal with that name? This is Latin. So the Latin name for Charles is Carolus. That's why we are Carolina. We are the land of Charles. When we get to the Stuart family kings of England in the 1600s, middle 1600s, were named for one of the two King Charleses that we'll talk about, who was later when we were founded. So Carolingian is Latin for the Charles' dynasty. We don't know what, you can Google all kinds of things as far as what Charlemagne looks like, but remember, we've lost the artistic ability during this time, so there are no lifelike images of what Charlemagne looked like. All of them are going to be guesses, except this one thing that always cracks me up. Of Charlemagne, this is from what's called an illuminated manuscript, from some of the few people who can write. Here is Charlemagne, so totally lifelike image, telling off his wife. So you can kind of get an idea in this, for one thing, the superiority of the king, probably also some, domestic situations of not fully respecting his wife, because she is backing off with her creepy hands that can palm a basketball. So this is kind of showing the level of artwork that we have at this point. I think my 11-year-old nephew can do a better job. And also some of the, again, kind of representative of some of the ways that husband-wife relationships could be viewed at the time, maybe of Charlemagne's attitude as well. This, the top of it got cropped off again. Okay, on Christmas Day of the year 800, a key event occurs where, notice, Charlemagne is getting this crown on his head, and the person putting that crown on his head is in all sorts of fancy regalia. That would be the Pope, a guy named Pope Leo. What happens on this day is that Charlemagne was crowned emperor of the Romans by the Pope. Okay, random factoid, there you go. This is going to become a big issue for centuries. For one thing, it's kind of neat because we're talking about Western Civ. We're seeing this fusion of cultures as they're merging together. We've got a Germanic king. The Franks are a Germanic group. There was no Christianity at that time, and they convert to that long after Christianity began. The Romans, also not a Christian culture for a long time, and the Romans and Germanic people were not the same, and the Pope. So we have this weird merger of Christian traditions, Roman traditions, this old idea, emperor of the Romans, summoning this idea of Augustus and Nero and all these other guys, Claudius, Constantine, that title coming back. That is fueled by the Pope, but here comes the big question. Who has more power? Does the Pope have more power? Because he's the spiritual leader, but he was the one who crowned the emperor. He selected this emperor. Or, because you say, well, it's an emperor, he's the ruler, does he, whoever the emperor is, have more power? So it's going to set up these power struggles for a long time to come. But we've got this idea of a Holy Roman Empire developing again, and along with that, these conflicts that will later emerge between popes and emperors as there's a competition later for power. So Charlemagne ushers that in. Now I'm going to move this back down. Another thing that occurs will be the emergence. His empire is going to be called the Carolingian Empire. So once he becomes emperor, he's got pretty much direct control over these light green areas and sort of indirect control over the darker green areas. So you still have the Pope in charge of territory in the Papal States. You had some of these other areas, but a big old empire that has reemerged. And one of the things that he does, I just forgot his name, the Count in Sesame Street, Count what is his name? Count Nuts. I'm pausing to look up the name of the Count. Okay, according to Siri knowledge, it's just Count Von Count. The Count Dracula, and he thinks he's the guy who comes up with counts, Charlemagne does, to kind of govern, oversee local areas. Charlemagne says, okay, it's not practical for one guy to know what's going on in all of these places, so we get the emergence of counts, kind of dividing that labor among other places. His home base is here in Aachen, so what's now in Germany, but that's his headquarters. And another thing that Charlemagne does up there is Charlemagne may have been likely illiterate. There's some evidence that he was trying to learn how to write, but there's a little bit of a return in learning and language. He wanted those people who worked for him to be able to communicate. He says, okay, right? That's kind of a problem, and so he started schools for, not public schools like what we have, but he wanted language. So this brief return to written language that occurs during his tenure, whatever. You're just going to have to read the black. This is an example of some of the written language that they come back up with. I know it's not clear, but hard to get a big picture of it. So a Renaissance, it's not our big Renaissance that's coming up later in the course, but this idea of a return to the, Renaissance means a rebirth, so sort of a renewal of learning that occurs during Charlemagne's time. He is, so up in Aachen, I just wanted to show, I'll get this thing off of there. There was Mecca from our other stuff. Let's see, if we go to Aachen, you can see his throne, or we can just see it on Google Earth, if like me, you can't afford to go to Aachen. And it's in the cathedral. Can identify. When we get to the churches emerging, we'll talk about how you can use. Well, that may be it. Usually identify those from the aerial view, but this was a little bit. Oh, there we go. I assume that's going to be the cathedral. Let's see if. Usually they're going to be cross-shaped later. Talking to myself. If I can find it. Woo, it's not very clear. I don't know where it is in there. I'm guessing it's somewhere up here. But we'll just do this. You can see his throne in that building there, so the one that we were just in. So it's little steps, and you can see the throne that Charlemagne sat on in the late 700s, into the 800s. Doesn't look super comfortable, but that is where Charlemagne would sit on his throne while he was emperor there. So when Charlemagne dies, where am I? Nope, that's not us. That was from another day, and I took those slides because we're all crazy behind. We get this situation. His son is unable to hold the empire together, the same empire that his dad successfully held together for so long. So it was divided among his 3 grandsons. And why am I not typing all of it? And you can tell kind of with a modern day map these divisions. The one on the left is going to become more the country of France. German territory, so what will later become the country of Germany, is here. When Lothar dies, this area in between the two is going to be, the two sides on the left and right are going to fight over this land up until World War II. They both want control, and so a struggle that lasts 1,100 years, so that thing's still pertinent with a region in that goes back and forth between France and Germany, called Alsace-Lorraine. Lorraine. So this territory right there on the France-Germany border. So, Hitler, it's one of the territories in World War II that he goes after because it's really pretty. I think I'd like to go. So still a struggle that is pretty pertinent today that goes on there. So It's 15 minutes. We'll stop there with Charlemagne.